The next time you pull into a gas station, before you swipe your card, before you watch the numbers climb on the pump, I want you to think about something. The fuel entering your tank was almost certainly extracted from the ground somewhere in the Middle East, or traded on a market that prices oil in a specific currency. Not euros, not gold, not the currency of the country that produced it. US dollars. Always US dollars. Every barrel of oil sold on the global market, whether it originates in Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Venezuela, or anywhere else, is denominated in US dollars. You have probably never questioned this. It seems like a fact of nature, like gravity, like the price of oil simply is what it is, in dollars, because that is how the world works. But it is not a fact of nature. It is the result of a specific agreement negotiated in secret between the United States Treasury and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 1974. An agreement that was never ratified by Congress, never debated publicly, never disclosed to the American people at the time it was made. An agreement whose consequences for your gas bill, your grocery prices, your retirement savings, and the global balance of power continue to shape your daily life over 50 years later. This is the story of the Petrodollar Pact, and it begins 3 years after the story we told in our last episode. When Richard Nixon closed the gold window on August 15, 1971, he solved one problem and created several others. The immediate problem he solved was simple. The United States could stop hemorrhaging gold to foreign governments who were legally redeeming their dollar reserves. But in solving that problem, he created a far more dangerous one. The US dollar, now untethered from gold, needed a reason to exist as the world's reserve currency. It needed a foundation. Something that would compel every nation on earth to hold dollars, demand dollars, and accept dollars in exchange for real goods and real resources. Without that foundation, the dollar was just paper, printed by a government that had already demonstrated it would print as much as it needed. Foreign nations knew this. The dollar's credibility was at its lowest point since World War II. And into this crisis stepped two men. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, arguably the most influential foreign policy architect of the 20th century and a long-standing participant in the Bilderberg network we examined in our last episode, and Treasury Secretary William Simon, a former Wall Street bond trader who understood with crystalline clarity what the dollar needed to survive. Their solution was not economic. It was not monetary. It was military. What Kissinger and Simon understood, and what very few people have ever been taught, is this. The dollar did not need gold to back it. It needed something more reliable than gold. It needed something every industrialized nation on earth required in unlimited quantities and could not produce for itself. It needed oil. And the nation that controlled the most important oil market in the world, that set the pace for global oil pricing, that held the swing production capacity that could flood or starve the global market, was Saudi Arabia. In 1974, Kissinger flew to Riyadh. What he carried in his briefcase would reshape the global financial order for the next half-century. The agreement negotiated between the United States and Saudi Arabia in 1974 was not a single document signed at a single meeting. It was a framework built across several months of quiet diplomacy that rested on two pillars. The first pillar was Saudi Arabia's commitment to price its oil exclusively in US dollars, not just Saudi oil, but to use its influence within OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, to ensure that the entire cartel priced oil in dollars. Every nation that wanted to buy oil, which meant every industrialized nation on Earth, would first need to acquire US dollars to do so. Demand for the dollar was thus permanently guaranteed not by gold in a vault, but by the energy needs of the entire global economy. The second pillar was the American commitment to Saudi Arabia in exchange. The United States would provide the Saudi royal family with military protection, hardware, training, intelligence, and the implicit guarantee of American military intervention if the regime faced existential threat. The United States would also allow Saudi Arabia to recycle its enormous US dollar earnings, the petrodollars flowing in from global oil sales, back into US Treasury bonds. This meant that Saudi oil wealth was continuously reinvested into American government debt, financing American spending and keeping US interest rates artificially low. The arrangement was elegant in its mutual benefit for the two governments involved. For everyone else, the consequences were more complicated. William Simon later described the arrangement with characteristic bluntness. The Saudis, he said, were effectively being asked to prop up the American financial system, and in exchange, America was underwriting the survival of a monarchy that had never held a democratic election. The details of the agreement were kept from public view for decades. It was not until 2016 that Bloomberg News, through a Freedom of Information Act request, obtained documents confirming the specific mechanisms of the US-Saudi petrodollar arrangement. The agreement that had governed global energy pricing and dollar dominance since 1974 had been operating in complete secrecy for 42 years.
Let me be very specific about what this means for you. Because of the petrodollar system, every nation on Earth must hold US dollar reserves to participate in global energy markets. This creates a permanent, structural demand for dollars, regardless of American economic performance, regardless of American debt levels, regardless of how many dollars the Federal Reserve prints. It is the reason the United States has been able to run the largest national debt in human history without triggering the kind of currency collapse that would destroy any other nation. It is the reason American consumers have been able to import goods from around the world at prices that do not fully reflect the actual cost of American spending. And it is the reason that any nation that has attempted to price its oil in a currency other than the dollar, Iraq in 2000, Libya in 2009, has faced consequences that extend well beyond economics. Saddam Hussein announced his intention to sell Iraqi oil in euros in the year 2000. He was removed from power in 2003. Muammar Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed African currency to replace the dollar in oil transactions in 2009. He was removed from power in 2011. Whether those connections are causal or coincidental, history does not offer a clean answer, but the pattern is difficult to ignore.
The petrodollar system, in its most direct form, has delivered genuine benefits to the United States. It has financed American global military dominance. It has kept consumer prices lower than they would otherwise be. It has allowed successive American governments to borrow and spend at a scale that would be impossible for any other nation. For the American working and middle class, the generation that built their lives in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, the petrodollar was the invisible subsidy that made the American standard of living possible. But it came with costs that were never publicly debated. It permanently entangled American foreign policy with the internal politics of the Saudi royal family, a relationship that has required the United States to overlook human rights abuses, democratic deficits, and actions that would have been intolerable from any other American ally. It created an incentive structure that made American military presence in the Middle East not a choice, but a structural necessity, a permanent commitment enforced not by democratic decision, but by the financial architecture of the dollar itself. And it created a global financial system in which American monetary decisions, how much the Federal Reserve prints, what interest rates it sets, how much the US government borrows, impose consequences on every other nation on Earth, whether they agreed to those consequences or not. The economist Barry Eichengreen described the dollar's reserve status as an exorbitant privilege, a phrase first coined by French finance minister Valéry Giscard d'Estaing in the 1960s, who used it as a criticism. The privilege is real, but so is the architecture that sustains it. An architecture built in secret in 1974, without democratic consent, on both sides of the agreement.
Go back to that gas station. The price on that pump, whatever it is today, reflects a chain of decisions that runs from a secret meeting in Riyadh in 1974, through the Federal Reserve Building in Washington, through the trading floors of commodity markets that price everything in a currency whose dominance was negotiated behind closed doors before most people filling their tanks today were born. You did not agree to this system. Your parents did not vote on it. Your grandparents were not consulted. It was designed, as all the systems we have examined in this series were designed, by people who were certain they knew best, who were certain the ends justified the means, who were certain that secrecy was necessary because transparency would have made what they were doing impossible. They were probably right about that last part. We have now examined 6 pillars of the same structure. The Federal Reserve, designed in secret to control the money supply. Operation Mockingbird, designed in secret to control the information supply. The Nixon shock, executed in secret to remove the last restraint on that money supply. MK Ultra, executed in secret on the bodies and minds of citizens who trusted their government. The Bilderberg Group, the ongoing private forum where the people who benefit from all of this continue to coordinate. And the Petrodollar, the hidden engine that has kept the entire structure running for 50 years. Each one connected, each one feeding the others. In our next episode, we go inside the institution that ties them all together. The organization that has shaped every major U.S. foreign policy decision since 1921. That has placed its members in virtually every senior government position across both political parties for over a century, that operates entirely in the open and yet remains almost completely unknown to the public it has spent 100 years governing. The Council on Foreign Relations. That story, next episode.